Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Eternals. Let's talk about it. So Eternals is directed by Chloe Zhao, the Academy Award-winning director of Nomadland, and of course Nomadland itself won the Academy Award for Best Picture this year, so she is a big deal at the moment, okay? Chloe Zhao is having a moment in her career, being the very first female director to win the Academy Award, this esteemed award for her incredible work on Nomadland. Now, if you've been around here for a minute, you will know, like, especially if you've been watching my videos covering the Academy Awards and award season in general this year, you'll know that I was perhaps in the minority in that I didn't love Nomadland. I didn't love Nomadland. I was like, oh my god, I'm so happy that we've got a female director winning Best Director at the Academy Awards. Like, bravo, bravo, brava. I was so happy for Chloe Zhao when she won, but I have to say, I have to be honest when I say that Nomadland was literally my least favorite film of all of the lineup for the Best Picture nominees. So when Nomadland won Best Picture, I was like, okay, I'm still happy for Chloe, like my girl Chloe, I'm so proud of her, but are we sure we've made the right decision? Like, are we sure? Like, Judas and the Black Messiah is literally right there. Are we sure? And I have to say, similarly, when it comes to my anticipation of Eternals, I wasn't really frothing at the mouth to see this film either. I mean, I've been super excited to see what the MCU does on the TV platform in terms of their Disney Plus series. And of course, I was also really excited to see the films of Phase 4, but the majority of the films in Phase 4 that I was most looking forward to are actually coming out next year or the year after, or in the case of Spider-Man No Way Home, at the very end of 2021 if it doesn't get pushed. So when it comes to the films that were in between me and Spider-Man, I was like, I need you guys to get out of the way. Like, if I'm being honest, I need Black Widow to get out of the way. Really liked the film, okay? It wasn't the best MCU film ever. It was pretty, you know, run-of-the-mill, but I still very much enjoyed it. I needed to get Shang-Chi out of the way as well. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, but those trailers weren't impressive. But in the case of Shang-Chi, the trailers proved to be inferior to the actual product. The trailers did the film no justice whatsoever, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how excellent Shang-Chi ended up being. And so because of that, I was also similarly hopeful for Eternals, because after seeing Shang-Chi and seeing how much better it was than the trailers made it out to be, I was like, okay, so maybe we're just dealing with a bad trailer company, and in actuality the film's going to end up being amazing. And maybe the fact that I don't like Nomadland is just like a one-off. Like, maybe Chloe Zhao, working under the Marvel machine, will be able to produce something unique, stylistically hers, but at the same time still really excellent when it comes to the comic book movies that Marvel produces. Like, maybe we'll get the best of both worlds. No, that's not what happened. I'm here to deliver some really sad news, because unfortunately, despite the fact that Shang-Chi ended up being miles better than the trailers made it out to be, in the case of the Eternals, a lot of the issues that I had, a lot of the queries, the concerns that I had after watching some of the trailers for the film ended up manifesting, or very much being a concern, in the film itself. So we're going to dive into my thoughts on Eternals, perhaps the biggest problem child that Marvel has had to date, considering the reviews that it has gotten. It's not looking good. Before we delve into all of that, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Eternals. So first of all, before we get into the nitty-gritty, before we start criticizing this film left, right and center, I just want to get into the good stuff. I just want to get into the stuff that I actually really enjoyed about Eternals. We're going to start off on a positive note here, and the first thing that comes to mind is most definitely how stunning this film looks. The cinematography is there, yup. Okay, this is Chloe Zhao we're talking about. Like, Chloe Zhao has already made a name for herself when it comes to her depictions of landscapes and gorgeous natural environments. We saw that in Nomadland. You know, one of the few things that I really appreciated about about Nomadland was just how stunning everything looked, how she depicts natural environments and nature itself. I think is really commendable. It's something that she clearly has an eye for and an appreciation for, and it shows in her work. And here is no different either. Like, you see these gorgeous landscapes as they travel across different environments and ecosystems around the world, because the Eternals have been around for so long and have existed in so many different environments. You really get to reap the benefits of Chloe Zhao's eye when it comes to depicting said environment. So that's definitely something that this film excels in, this kind of depiction of nature, feeling grounded in a very beautiful way, as opposed to a boring, desaturated, horrible looking way. And I think Chloe Zhao did a great job in, you know, amplifying the colors of nature, not making everything look desaturated just to make it feel more realistic. Another thing that I really liked about this film was the concept of the cast itself. I liked the idea of the Eternals being depicted by people from all around the world, all of these different ethnicities, as well as, you know, we have a character who is deaf, and so she speaks with, I think it's like American Sign Language here, but I like the fact that we have that diversity at play here. I really appreciated that about the film, and it felt natural for the Eternals itself, because like, why would they just be one race, you know what I mean? Especially when you consider how they were manufactured in the first place. Although, well, I have some thoughts on the whole plot itself. Okay, I liked the idea of introducing even more diversity in the MCU through the characters in the Eternals. What's another thing that I liked about this film? I also enjoyed the concept of the Eternals. I didn't hate. I've always said that I really love Greco-Roman mythology, okay? I've said this time and time again, and I would love to see a film or like a mini franchise within a universe that explores Greco-Roman mythology in the context of a comic book franchise. Like, I think that would be so cool. I know that we have some of that in DC, and with the case of Wonder Woman, where we kind of explore Greek mythology through the character of Diana and her past as well, and where she comes from. But I would like to see more of that. I would like to see like actual depictions of Greek or Roman gods fighting in Olympus, so, you know, just something that really delves into that kind of mythology that could also exist in the MCU, because things have gotten so crazy in the MCU that like literally anything is plausible. We already have Norse mythology in the MCU. Why not expand upon it with, you know, some Roman or Greco-Roman mythology as well? So this film kind of touches on that. We have characters like Icarus and Athena, so we have nods to that, but it doesn't fully commit. It would actually make total sense if we saw the Eternals come to Earth 7,000 years ago, and they had these godlike powers, and they were seen as these godlike beings to the point where they became the Greek gods. I feel like that would make sense. I feel like it would be a really clever way of incorporating the Eternals as part of human history and mythology and legend, just so we can feel their impact and we feel how they have changed the trajectory of human life throughout the millennia, but at the same time you still have this kind of mysticism of, were they really real? Roman mythology came out of style, so maybe it's a case where they used to be worshipped as gods, but then that kind of faded away, made a way for Christianity, and they kind of faded in the wayside, and then they disappeared off and did their own thing for millennia to come. So I feel like there could have been something there when it comes to the Eternals and their existence on Earth, and a lot of opportunities were missed. I'm supposed to be talking about what I liked. I'm supposed to be talking about what I liked. I've already gotten sidetracked. I guess now I've run out of things for this section, so we're gonna have to move on to the critiques. So next up we have the critique section. Next up we have the stuff that I had an issue with when it came to this film, and I'm gonna do something that I rarely do with my reviews, and that is kind of rewrite things, kind of give you guys an alternative kind of script for the film. I don't tend to rewrite films because I'm not a writer. I don't have the talent, okay? But when it comes to Eternals, there were so many missed opportunities and so many different storylines that I came up with in my head as I was watching the film. I just felt like maybe I could kind of dive into the ideas that I had whilst I was watching it, and the different kind of character arcs and some characters that I think we could have gotten rid of. We'll talk about it. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing in this section of the film. Again, I don't usually do this, but there's so many decisions that were made here where I'm like, why? And I have to preface this by saying that, like, if it sounds like I'm struggling, it's because I am. I'm not used to sitting here and criticizing a Marvel film, okay? Like, if you've been around for a while, you know that I'm a Marvelite. You know that I'm a Marvel fan, okay? So this kind of hurts my heart. Like, I'm sitting here like, oh, what do I do? So first of all, let's talk about the plot itself. So as I said, here we have the Eternals at the center of the story. These are these godlike beings that came from space and arrived on Earth approximately 7,000 years ago, from my understanding, and they were brought on Earth to take down the Deviants. Now, the Deviants are another set of alien species that I believe in the comics have a slightly different origin, and I believe in the comics like Thanos is a Deviant and whatever, which will kind of link into one of the big questions when it comes to the Eternals, which we'll talk about in a second. But their whole job basically is to take down the Deviants in order to make way for life to grow on Earth, because it's all part of this bigger plan by the Celestials, who are like the gods of the MCU. Again, we're playing into mythology here, so it really was piquing my interest, even if it wasn't Greco-Roman mythology specifically. Now, one of the big questions that everyone was asking when it came to the Eternals, and when everyone saw just how powerful they were and the fact that they have been on Earth for thousands of years, kind of guiding humanity through evolution and through development of huge civilizations, one of the questions that came to mind immediately upon seeing this premise is, well, where were they when Thanos came along? Where were my guys, the Eternals, when Thanos came along and snapped half of the universe out of existence? Where were they then? Like, they're supposed to be some of the most powerful creatures, some of the most powerful beings in the universe itself. So like, where were they when Thanos was here? And that's the question that Kit Harington's character asks almost immediately once he finds out who Cersei is. He's like, oh, where were you guys? Like, we literally had a whole Thanos situation. We really could have used your help there. And the answer that Cersei gives him is that they're only supposed to intervene when it comes to matters to do with the Deviants, but anything else, they just kind of have to let humanity do its thing. This is problem number one. This is red flag number one, because that doesn't make sense. Because it turns out that the main issue of the Eternals wasn't just to lovingly guide humanity through its evolution and through civilizations, but rather it was to build humanity to a point where there would be enough energy, there would be enough life source to harbor the birth of an entire celestial, basically. So they were actually there to prepare the Earth for a godlike being to be born from its core, from its very core. So obviously that would lead to the destruction of the entire planet. Now, the majority of the Eternals didn't know that that was the true mission that they were sent on Earth to carry out. But still, when you consider the fact that that godlike celestial being that was communicating with Ajak already knew what the plan was all along, why wouldn't he have encouraged the Eternals to step in when Thanos came along and literally snapped half of the universe out of existence? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't correlate with the mission here, because with Thanos snapping half of Earth out of existence, you've literally eradicated half of the life force that was supposed to support the birth of the Celestial. So like, what's really going on? Again, like, at this point, Cersei doesn't know the truth about their mission on Earth. But the big guy, I can't remember his name, but the one that Ajak communicates with, he knew what the ultimate mission was. So it's weird that they didn't step in order to prevent Thanos from destroying half of the world, and therefore half of the work that the Eternals did painstakingly through the course of thousands of years. I mean, it's almost as if the Eternals weren't written into the MCU in time to fight in the Infinity Wars. Now, another thing that I didn't really love when it came to this story was the villain, or at least the lack thereof. I'm so sick and tired of Disney robbing us of good, compelling, black and white villains. I am sick of it. Okay, I've had enough. I've had enough of this, like, complexity, gray area, blah, blah, blah. You can still have a villain that falls in the gray area, that has a bit of complexity to them, but it's still compelling, but it's still villainous and deliciously evil, but it's still an enjoyable character to watch. You can still have that, I promise you. You can still have that. Why have we forgone the villain entirely? Why have we rejected the notion of a bad guy? I don't understand it. I don't understand it, quite personally. Isn't Bad Guy Billie Eilish's like best song or like most successful song? Why doesn't Disney get a clue and realize that we love bad guys? We love villains as a society. Why are they robbing us of yet another great villain? This film doesn't have a great villain. This film has the deviants who end up just being, you know, these alien creatures that were also created by the Celestials to take away the predators that were naturally on Earth before humankind came to evolve. So they were supposed to get rid of all of the predators to make way for the evolution and the prosperity of humankind, but then they went off on a mad one and they evolved themselves, and then the Eternals came along to take them down. So we have the deviants who end up being just as much victims of Arishem, that's his name, Arishem, Arishem and his plan and the plans of the other Celestials as the Eternals are themselves. Like, they're just foot soldiers in the Celestial army. We don't even get the satisfying villainous angle when it comes to the deviants. Also, they're depicted as these ugly, you know, monstrous beings that like just generic alien monster. No. Like, I genuinely don't understand how someone sat down, right? Someone at Marvel sat down, watched Eric Killmonger, watched Loki, watched Thanos, all of these incredible villains that people love, that people have gravitated towards, and they were like, you know what? We're not going to do any of that. We're not going to have a single villain that people can be captivated by, that people can be convinced by. No. We're just going to have these grotesque monsters. They're going to represent soldiers who are fighting in a battle that doesn't serve them, because the Celestials are these godlike beings sending these, you know, victims to do their dirty work, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I don't want it. I've had enough. This is like a breaking point for me. I wasn't actually that upset when I sat down to film this video, but now that I'm talking about this, I'm like, I am sick and tired. Give us a good villain. Give us a good... We haven't had a good villain in phase 4 yet, whether it be in the Disney Plus shows or in the movies. Like, did you notice? Clearly, at this point, Kang is my only hope, because these villains have sucked. And now we have Eternals, where once again, you know, the deviants are really victims, the Celestials are the villains, but really we don't have a single being that embodies the Celestials, that actually comes down on Earth and, you know, interacts with the heroes to make it feel meaningful. The Celestials are just concepts. Like, they're intimidating in design, and you know, they have a really cool look to them, but it's not the same as like Loki talking to Black Widow in the first Avengers film. Like, it's just not... It's not the same. Another issue that I had with this story was how bogged down it was with the exposition. Now, I understand that the Eternals is a quite niche comic book series that a lot of people have never even heard of. So, of course, we would require a lot of explanation for what was going on and trying to figure out the power dynamics at play here. You know, we have these Eternals. They're already supposed to be godlike beings, but then we have the Celestials who are like even more powerful. And honestly, as the MCU is expanding more and more and is delving into more niche comic book series, we really are starting to need some sort of charts to figure out the power structure in not just the Earth and not just the galaxy, but in the universe as a whole. Because we have the Eternals, we have the Norse gods and the Asgardians, you know, where are they at in terms of power level? We also have the Celestials, of course. Then we have characters like Ego, who's like a whole planet, like the living planet. And then we have characters like the Collector and Jeff Goldblum's character. I can't remember his name at the moment, but it's just weird to see these different powerful beings all exist in this universe. We're starting to lose perspective on what a powerful being is in the MCU. And speaking of the power sets and the power dynamics at play here when it came to the Eternals themselves, I have to say some of these characters were like, Okay. Like, like, I could take them. Like, obviously I'm joking, but like, honestly, like, if you think of like the Avengers, I feel like there were some characters in the Avengers, the Hulk, that could absolutely take on one of the Eternals. Like, is it just me? I would like to see a battle between the Hulk and Gilgamesh, because I low-key think the Hulk would win, honestly. Either way, I do feel like the MCU is struggling to find new ways to depict these incredibly powerful beings, because each and every time it's like, this person's even more powerful than that person that you were afraid of. And it's like, are they? Are they though? And in some cases, these characters even mimic directly some of the power sets that we've already seen in other characters. Take, for example, Sprite. Her whole thing is a low-key shtick from like the first Thor film. I was really annoyed by that. She even did the low-key stab in the back thing. Like, I was so annoyed when she duplicates herself, because she's like this illusionist, so she's able to duplicate herself just like Loki in the first Thor film, and she stabs someone in the back. I think it's Cersei, and it's like, this is Loki's power set. Like, am I supposed to be impressed that she's an Eternal when she's basically the same as an Asgard, well, I guess a frost giant? Speaking of the Eternals themselves, now let's get into my ranking of each of these characters and delve into my thoughts on each of them and whether or not I even think they need to be in this film at all. Okay, so let's start off with my favorite character of all of the Eternals, and that is my girl Makkari. Makkari is a goddess, okay? She is the speedster of the group, and she is portrayed by Lauren Ridloff, who is a deaf actress, and she portrays a deaf character in this film. I love the fact that we have seen an increase in the depiction of individuals who are deaf. For example, in A Quiet Place and in Sound of Metal, which she was also in, and she was absolutely phenomenal in that film. Excellent film, by the way. Definitely check out A Sound of Metal because it was brilliant. So here she's depicting a character who's deaf, because I believe the concept is that the sonic boom that's created every time she rushes around and, you know, does her speedster thing, ended up blowing out her eardrums, and that's what caused her to become deaf, I think. Either way, I love the representation. I love the way that the rest of the team communicate with her effortlessly, because they've been together for thousands of years, and they don't bat an eyelash when they need to, you know, communicate with her through, I guess, American Sign Language somehow, before America was a thing. Anyways, but I just really loved the spirit of this character. She was playful, joyful. She felt more in line with what an MCU character should be. She felt more in line with what I would expect from a character in the MCU. And I feel like that really wasn't the case for the majority of these characters, unfortunately. So I really liked my girl Makkari. I would love to see more of her, perhaps elsewhere in the MCU, if not strictly in another Eternals movie. And then we kind of get into my rewrite of the characters. As I said, we're going to be talking about some alternative ways that the story and these characters could have gone in. And one thing that I kind of appreciated about the film was being able to see where all of these characters ended up after the thousands of years that they were, you know, trying to take down the deviants on Earth. You know, when their mission was seemingly done, they kind of split apart and did their own thing for a few thousand years, as you do. But unfortunately, we don't actually get to see where Makkari ended up, because she was just on the ship when everyone gathered round. So I guess she was just chilling there for ages. But I think it would have been great if we saw her in some sort of sports environment. Like, I think it would have been so fun if she ended up being a kind of coach to Olympians. Actually, that makes sense thematically as well, because she thinks she's from Olympus. Genius. An absolute genius. But yeah, I think it would have made sense if when we had met her, she was training up some like Olympic athletes, maybe getting some actual Olympic athletes in there to cameo in the film. I think that would have been sick. I think that would have been so much fun. And of course, they can never go as fast as her, but it still makes sense to have her be in that setting where she enjoys teaching people, she enjoys encouraging the athletes, but at the same time, she has a ton of energy to burn herself. Maybe we get a scene where after everyone has gone home and they're done their training, she's still on the track and she like runs around the track a million times. I think that would have been great. I think that would have been superb, and a much better use of the character's skill set in order to demonstrate her place in the modern day. Okay, so closely followed by my girl Makari, we have my second favorite Eternal in Druig. I love Druig. First of all, he was sympathetic towards the human cause. He started to see the cracks in their mission from quite early on. We see them land in the middle of what looks to be the Spanish invasion of South America. They seem to be in like Machu Picchu, I think it is. So the Eternals witness a bunch of these Spanish conquistadors make their way through the thick Amazon forest, taking down the native South Americans. Just this complete massacre, this complete genocide of these native peoples. And Druig is the one to be like, well, hang on, why are we letting this happen? Why are we letting this happen? And, you know, Ajax says something about, oh, we're only supposed to intervene if it's to do with the deviants. But I love the fact that Druig is like, screw that. And he kind of takes over everyone's minds, which is why he's my second favorite, because I'm not for mind control, okay? I'm not a proponent of ripping people away from their own autonomy and their own sense of self. Didn't love that about the character, but still I like the fact that he kind of deviated excuse the pun, from the mission that Ajax set out for the team, because she got her marching orders from Amersham, and he kind of did his own thing. And so we see in the future the kind of Amazonian community that speaks Spanish somehow. Anyways, we see the Amazonian community that he's still kind of in charge of, but they've remained relatively secluded, and you see that, you know, technology hasn't advanced as much as the rest of the world, but they seem pretty content in their existence in the Amazon nonetheless, and they have managed to avoid a bunch of war and a bunch of, you know, destruction and genocide. And I think that's what Druig was trying to accomplish, even though he did it in, you know, less than desirable ways. But aside from that, I really enjoyed Druig as a character in the modern day. I feel like the actor who portrays him did a really great job in making him stand out from the crowd, giving him a bit of an edge to his personality. I even saw it in his outfits. Like, it's one of the rare occasions where the MCU bothered to dress a male character in an interesting way, because the rest of them are all dressed in the, you know, standard Henley top with the like jacket on top and a cap on or whatever. But he's got this like gothic style to him. He's got this like punk style to him, which I appreciated. And yeah, it just helped to set him apart from the rest. And I feel like I would love to see him interacting with, you know, other characters in the MCU. And I can't say the same for some of these other characters. And also, I have to say, there are a couple of romantic couples in this film. Some of them more obvious than others. We'll get to that in a second. But of all of them, my favorite, of course, was Makari and Druig. They weren't like overtly romantic. They could have just been good friends. But I would like to believe in my headcanon that they're romantic, that they're romantically involved in this most like adorable way. I love how much Druig really cared for Makari. Their whole interactions were everything to me. Everything. And next up we have Thena, who is portrayed by the incredible, the glamorous, the glorious Angelina Jolie herself. I think it is a crime. I think it is a crime that Angelina Jolie wasn't the lead in this film. I think it is literally criminal. Are you kidding me? Angelina Jolie is arguably the biggest, no, not arguably, it is the biggest name on this already impressive cast. The fact that she's portraying Thena instead of Cersei makes absolutely no sense to me. And I can imagine that she saw the appeal in depicting this powerful warrior who has this legendary status. But considering we don't really get to see her be a powerful warrior in the past, we don't actually get to see how she built to that reputation in the past. We do get some really cool action sequences with her, but we get that for like all of the characters pretty much. So like the fact that we don't even get that, it's like, I would rather she be the main character. I would rather she be Cersei. And to me, it makes sense if she was Cersei as well. She would have been like the kind of mother nature, the Gaia in Greek mythology. She would be able to tap into the earth's power. She would be able to manipulate natural natural elements like, you know, earth and fire and water and all of that. I feel like Angelina Jolie would thrive in that kind of role. And also it would still make sense that she would be working at the Natural History Museum in London, because of course she's, you know, all about the elements, all about nature and everything. So it would still make sense that she works there. The relationship between Cersei and Kit Harington's character, I think Kane is his name or something, Dane, yeah, that would be gone. That would be gone. Not because Angelina Jolie couldn't sell a relationship or a romance with Kit Harington's character, but because that romance was just so pointless, so unnecessary. I wouldn't even try to put her through that. So no, that would be gone. Instead, she would be this like well-respected archaeologist or historian or something that everyone looks up to, and she would be sitting in on Kit Harington's talk about whatever, and he would be talking about something to do with his character of, you know, Black Knight, as opposed to whatever he was talking about like predators and everything. We didn't need that. We really didn't need that whole lecture about predators. I know it was supposed to be like foreshadowing for the predator thing when it came to the deviants, but like we didn't need it. We can scrap that. Instead, he can be talking about the history of that sword that he found at the very end of the film that kind of ties into his Disney Plus show, and she would be watching him and kind of mentoring him, and he would be like, oh my god, Angelina Jolie is mentoring me, and that's the kind of interaction that they would have. And then the earthquake would strike. By the way, the fact that none of the characters, these British characters, were surprised when an earthquake struck London, the fact that they were like, oh my god, it must be an earthquake. Must be an earthquake. In London, it's more likely that the building was being blown up. Like, I'm sorry, London doesn't get earthquakes like that. So the fact that they weren't surprised was a bit weird to me. Anyways, but that's what I would do with Angelina Jolie in this film. I would make her the star of the show because duh. It's at this point as well that I mentioned that I would also change the character of Cersei to become a hybrid between the Cersei that we got in the film and Ajax, because here's another issue when it comes to this story. There are way too many characters, way too many main characters. There are about, what, 10 Eternals? That's way too many. As a result of that, they don't really get enough time in the spotlight to shine on their own. There are so many characters in this lineup, there's no way that in the runtime that we have, though already long, we would have been able to do justice to each and every one of them. I mean, if you think of the first Avengers film, we had, what, 6 Avengers there, and 4 of them had already had films that explore their independent backstory, so we were already familiar with them when we went into the first Avengers film. Whereas here, we're supposed to be introduced to all of these characters, 10 of them, as well as the world of Celestials and the mythology surrounding that, as well as diving into the plot at hand and what's going on with the birth of this new Celestial. It's way too much. It's way too much, and I feel like it created a sort of paralysis. Kind of reminded me of me on a Saturday morning where I know that there's so much to do. I know that I have so much to do on my to-do list, but I'm just kind of stuck and paralyzed because where do I even begin? That's what this film felt like, and I think one of the issues was because of how many characters it had to juggle. So in light of this, I would merge Cersei and Ajax to be one character. I think it makes sense to have this kind of Gaia-like character also be the spiritual leader of the team. She could communicate with, oh god, what's his name? I've forgotten again. Amersham, that's it. She could communicate with Amersham. She could be the one getting the marching orders. Could still have a very similar storyline playing out. Perhaps she wouldn't be killed by Icarus, but he could still betray her in some way, and she would have to fight against him. Okay, so next up we have Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, and I actually really liked the idea of this character. I like the fact that he became a Bollywood star, and his answer to why he never ages is just that it's his like great-great-grandfather, and then it's his great-grandfather, and then it's his grandfather, who's just all starring in these films, and he's continuing on this family legacy where all of these actors just look exactly the same. I like that. I think that was a really great bit. Also, in theory, I liked the idea of him having this kind of, I think it's his chauffeur or his assistant, who kind of comes around with a camera and films everything that the Eternals are up to. That could have worked in theory. It could have been like a What We Do in the Shadows situation, both the show and the film, where you have this kind of invisible camera crew following the lives of these vampires in the modern day living in Staten Island. I feel like that could have been something, but the comedy in this film unfortunately doesn't land. it's not great, and so it doesn't really deliver on the potential of that bit. And also, speaking of comedy, considering that Kumail Nanjiani has his roots in comedy, I was quite disappointed to see how he was utilized in this film. He was very much a showboat, okay, you know, very much a showy, self-centered guy, but I feel like we could have had more comedy here. Like, the comedy in this film is lacking. It just felt like the editing wasn't tight enough for the comedy to really land, and also just some of these lines in general, whether they be comedic or not, something about the editing just threw me off. But yeah, when it comes to Kingo, I enjoyed the character. I would keep him in the lineup, but first of all, I would have swapped out his powers with the powers of Gilgamesh. I would have gotten rid of Gilgamesh entirely. I'll explain why in a second, but I would have given Kingo Gilgamesh's powers and maybe do like a double arm thing instead of a single arm, because Gilgamesh has like, he's the Iron Fist basically. Like, he has one arm that works really, really well. He's also a really dense guy, but I feel like, you know, Kingo could have served that role in a similar ways anyway. So I would have given Kingo Gilgamesh's powers, because as it stands, Kingo's powers are like, he's basically a gun, like he's basically a small grenade, like it's kind of unimpressive. So I would have given, I would have done a bit of a swapsies and given him Gilgamesh's powers. And also I would have emphasized the rivalry or the jealousy that Gilgamesh has towards Icarus, because it's kind of hinted at the idea that Gilgamesh envies Icarus because he can fly and he's like the Superman of the group. I would have hyped that up a bit, because I feel like the character dynamics and the team dynamics in the team within the Eternals, they're not like distinct enough. I would have liked to see an emphasis on how different characters interact within the team. Like, not everyone likes each other in an equal way across the board. I would have liked to see a little bit of rivalry. I would have liked to see some characters just not liking other characters, or maybe some things happened in the past where they're kind of fighting at the moment. I just think there could have been a better job done in terms of exploring this idea that we have a group of people who have been together for 7,000 years and they're not always going to get along. They're not always going to be on the same page. Maybe there's a little bit of bad blood between some of them. Like, I think we really could have played into that. And also, speaking of developing the team dynamic, I think it would have been a fun idea to introduce an increasing amount of Eternals as time went on. So maybe at first, when humanity was this tiny fledgling thing, there would have been 4 Eternals and they have specific skill sets to help humanity at that time. And then later down the line, we would see Eternals like Phastos, for instance, introducing this idea of, you know, technology and technological advancements. I feel like that would have made sense, as opposed to him coming along right at the very beginning and introducing this idea of like a steam engine to a prehistoric community. Like, that doesn't quite make sense. And that also would have added to the complexity of the team dynamics, because you would have had the OG people there and then some later additions, and perhaps they would butt heads. Okay, so next up we have Phastos himself. I would also keep him on the lineup. I feel like he has a unique enough power set to really stand out in this, again, ocean, this crowd of characters. And also, like I said, I would have introduced him later down the line, so that, you know, when technological advancements become more relevant, he would have stepped in to help humanity on its path. I really did like the inclusion of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. I feel like that was a very clever way of incorporating the character in world events and in world history, and seeing the kind of regrets that he had after that happened, and the role that he played in these technological advancements, I think was very, very smart. However, I do still think that it was a waste that the only way that they depicted the character in the modern day was him being at home with his family. Like, I get it, but we could have done a lot more. I fully expected him to be working in like Silicon Valley, seeing him working in this kind of technological environment, except this time around he's trying to develop technology that is, you know, for the good of humanity. Maybe he's working towards renewable energy resources, something along those lines, to incorporate again his unique power set and show how instrumental they would be to the modern day. As it stands, when we meet the character, he is living in Chicago, in some sort of suburban area, and he is with his husband and his son. And whilst I really appreciated and really loved the fact that we did get the depiction of an outwardly gay couple in the MCU, like indisputably gay couple. The character literally calls his partner his husband in the film explicitly. Okay, it's not some kind of murky thing that is implied in, no, it's clear. I very much appreciated that. Unfortunately, not everyone in the world did appreciate the inclusion of a same-sex couple in this film, because it was banned in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Unfortunately, you know, these nations are known for being quite anti-LGBTQ, and it's just really upsetting. It's really sad to see this kind of resistance towards progress and resistance towards acceptance of the LGBTQ community or its depictions in media, but it's not wholly surprising. I think, you know, a lot of times when we talk about these issues and talk about the representation of the LGBTQ community in media, we would like to think that we are further down the line than we actually are when you take a look at the scope of the world and attitudes in the world towards the LGBTQ community. So stories like this are really disheartening, really disappointing and upsetting, I'm sure, especially for the LGBTQ community, but it's not wholly surprising when you consider the attitudes that many different countries and cultures in the world have towards them. So yeah, that was definitely a real world bummer, but I very much appreciated the fact that the MCU took the step to give us an explicitly gay character. Not only that, but they were both characters of color. We have Brian Tyree Henry portraying Phastos here, and his husband was of Middle Eastern descent, so that is very notable. But still, I do think it was a little bit of a shame that we don't get to see the character of Phastos use his skills, okay, his powers in invention and ingenuity in the modern day, and instead he's just kind of succumbed to sticking to a suburban life. So next we have the Eternals that I wasn't really crazy about and I would have gotten rid of in my version of the film. First of all, we have Gilgamesh. I like Gilgamesh. I think he is fine as a character. He didn't really get a chance to shine in the film though, and I think he was superfluous when it comes to his, you know, power set and his position on the team. I just don't think he was wholly necessary, so I would have gotten rid of him, and like I said, I would have given his skill set and his powers to Kingo instead. Next we have the character of Ajak, and again, I don't hate the character of Ajak. I really like her. I love the fact that Salma Hayek is in the MCU. I just don't think the character was wholly necessary, at least not as an independent character. As I said, I would have merged her with Cersei to create one whole character. I wouldn't have killed her, because otherwise we would have killed Cersei, and like, who would be our protagonist or our main character? But instead I would have shown Icarus betraying her in some other way, maybe going straight to the boss. You know, surpassing her and going straight to the boss and getting his marching orders from them instead. Again, when we meet her in the modern day, she's just like riding a horse in the middle of a Dakota. Is it South, North Dakota? I can't remember. But one of the Dakotas, and it's like a waste. Like, we should have met her when she's working in like the Vatican or something. Like, she should be a religious leader or like a cult leader or something, you know, playing into the angle that she's supposed to be the spiritual leader of the Eternals, and maybe she has something to do with spirituality in the modern day as well. Do you know, like, this is what I'm talking about when I say there were missed opportunities in this film. Well, why would she just be in like some prairie environment, you know, riding her horse with her cowgirl cap on? Like, why is it the best that we could think of for the character of Ajak, who's like a religious leader? Maybe she missed having the Eternals follow her, so maybe she got a bunch of, you know, hippies in the 1970s to follow her instead, and they've continued following her ever since, and we just see a bunch of these old hippies kind of hanging on her every word. Like, I don't know, something interesting with the character. Anyways, I would have scrapped her entirely and merged her with the character of Cersei in my version. And finally we have Sprite, and I don't think she was wholly necessary in the team either. I like her power set, the illusion that she creates, and I think it makes sense as well, historically speaking, that she would be the kind of storyteller of the group, and perhaps she would have influenced the mythology and the religions that developed in these civilizations throughout history. Maybe that's something that they were inferring with her storytelling in the film. But I don't think it was a strong enough message to warrant the existence of the character overall, and also I really did despise the twist at the end that she resented Cersei because she was in love with Icarus, and she ends up following Icarus. Oh, I haven't talked about Icarus yet, have I? She chose to follow Icarus in the end because she was in love with him or something. That was so dumb. I hated that. That made no sense. First of all, she wasn't living with Icarus. She was living with Circe. So why would her loyalties lie with Icarus? That doesn't make any sense. At least if she had been introduced with Icarus, they had been living together, it would make some sort of sense. But she wasn't even living with him. So why would she turn on Circe like that? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Secondly, we didn't spend enough time with Icarus and Circe's romance to even be invested in it, let alone be invested in a love triangle between Icarus, Circe and Sprite. Like, absolutely not. Thirdly, we didn't get enough of her resenting humanity because she can never grow, or at least be shown to grow old. And so for that to be part of her character arc at the very end of the film was just like, whoa, you didn't seem that upset throughout the film. Like, we got hints of it throughout, but she didn't seem that upset. She didn't seem that upset. So in the end, when she's like, I hate human beings because I can't hang around them for more than 5 years because otherwise they get suspicious as to why I'm not aging. Like, at the end when that happened, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Where's all this anger coming from? Okay, so finally, let's talk about Icarus and Circe. I can't believe I haven't covered Icarus and Circe yet. I've been filming for like an hour and a half. I literally almost forgot them. I can't believe it. They would be low down on my list anyways. But in the case of Circe, like I said, I would get rid of her. I think Gemma Chan, she must be a good actress. She must be a good actress. You know, I never watched Humans, which is the show that kind of made her big. So I can't really attest to how her performance was in that show. I think she must be a good actress because she got on Hollywood's radar from that show. So, like, you know, there must be something going on there. But here, I think the thing to remember when it comes to the MCU is that it has the capability of making these actors legends, like literally making them modern day icons. Think of the debut of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, or, you know, Chris Evans as Captain America. These actors that people didn't really know about, that were quite obscure beforehand. Think how embedded in pop culture they have become. Think how well known and legendary they have become because of their roles in the MCU. Think of Chadwick Boseman, for example, this actor who was incredibly talented but not well known amongst mainstream audiences, and then when he passed tragically last year, the whole world mourned him. Like, the whole world was shocked and saddened by the news. Think of how huge these actors become when they join the MCU. There aren't any performances here, unfortunately, in Eternals that I would say would lead to that trajectory, at least not at this moment. And that also applies, unfortunately, to Gemma Chan's Circe. And so, unfortunately, in my kind of version of this film, Gemma Chan would have been scrapped and I would have had Angelina Jolie portray Circe, as I've already said. In reality, I just don't think she brought the pizzazz. I don't think she brought the special sauce that makes some of these MCU characters so iconic. And it's pretty much the same with Richard Madden's Icarus. The plot twist where he ends up betraying the group. Again, we don't get enough of a sense of who Icarus is. We don't even get to see where he came from. He literally pops up out of the blue in London when the Deviant attacks Circe. So we don't even get to see what he was doing in the modern day. We don't really get to explore the devoutness that he has, the commitment that he has to the mission, to following Amersham and his mission for Earth. We don't really get to explore that in any real depth. And so ultimately, when he comes to betray Ajax, even though it's kind of like, oh my god, he betrayed Ajax. Oh my god, because she thought that he would follow her anywhere, but it turns out he's more committed to the cause. Even though, you know, in theory that's a really cool twist, but in practice it doesn't really resonate because we don't really know much about the character. We never really got to see the world through the character's eyes. But I do think that Icarus as a character in theory is really impressive and interesting. I would still keep him on my lineup of the Eternals, but I would have just really emphasized this kind of devoutness, this kind of almost extremism that he has when it comes to the mission at hand, and that would have acted as a better foreshadowing for the ultimate plot twist of him betraying everyone. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Eternals a 6.5 out of 10. Yeah, it's not great, unfortunately. I am quite disappointed, and like I said, I'm not in the habit of dissing MCU films. As an MCU fan, this is quite disheartening, and I hope it doesn't become a trend. I hope it's just a one-off. But before I sign off, of course, I stayed behind for the end credit scenes, and so this is kind of my end credit scene so that you guys can find out my thoughts on the end credit scene. So the first end credit scene, I believe, was the one where Harry Styles just shows up out of the blue. So we have the introduction of Eros, who is apparently Thanos' brother. He is portrayed by Harry Styles, and like I said, he showed up out of the blue. He had this like kind of elven friends that kind of preceded him and announced him, and then you have the gang who are on the ship who just come face to face with Harry Styles. Harry Styles is in the MCU. I love to see it. I love to see it. I'm not even the biggest Harry Styles fan, but I whooped when I saw him in the MCU. And also, in the 2 seconds that Harry Styles was on screen, I couldn't help but think, like, this is the kind of charisma, this is the kind of electricity that I've come to expect from my MCU characters that was unfortunately lacking from the majority of the cast of Eternals. And I think it is to do with the direction. I think Chloe Zhao wanted to go in a more kind of serious and solemn route, but I don't think it works for the MCU. This isn't DC. And then we have the end credit scene. The other one was like a mid credits, right? We have the end credits scene where we have Kit Harington. Oh, I didn't even talk about Kit Harington. There were so many characters here. Kit Harington was fine. Like I said, I would have changed this kind of origin story to better suit the actual character of Black Knight and kind of act as a precursor to his Disney Plus show. I think we could have gotten a lecture on this, you know, artifact that he finds, this kind of sword. I think it would have made sense if the lecture that he had in the museum was discussing that artifact. So when we see it later on in the end credits scene, it would have made a little bit more sense, especially to people who don't know who Black Knight is. But then we hear a voice. Who it turns out is Mahershala Ali as Blade, and like, honestly, I was so excited. I was so excited. It's not enough to just have the voice. Okay, quite frankly, the fact that we didn't even get a glimpse of the character is insulting, but still, I'm so excited. That's it from me. It's been like an hour and 40 minutes. Holy shit. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Eternals, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.